Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Danielle Clark. We are here for another episode to talk about all things college football. I mean, what else would we be listening to as we tune in today? So I just wanted to say thanks for everyone who wished me well. On last week's episode, I lost my voice towards the end of the episode. I was not feeling my best, but it's okay. We are back. It is a lovely Friday morning, Friday the 14th. It was almost a Friday the 13th, which, gosh, I think the last Friday the 13th was March 13th, which was when the pandemic started, basically. So I hope you're all staying safe, having a good Friday. How are we doing today, everybody? Do we have any fun plans for the weekend? I personally do not. I will be glued to my computer looking for college football stuff to talk about, and updates, and research, and all that fun pizzazz. So, yes, we got a big show for you guys today. We are going over filling the void of the fall, moving forward, etc. When it comes to college football, we have spring football game plan. We are figuring out the college football playoff, and we are previewing the Big 12. And then we will finish it off with a fun little top 10 best football movies and TV shows. I thought that'd be a little fun one, so stick around for that, because something I nerd out about besides football is movies. So let's get into it today, people. No long intro, no spiel. I've had a lot of time to process what's been going on in college football, and I feel the last episode I kind of came off as not very empathetic, and I definitely felt, listening back, that I didn't sound like I was sad about it. I'm heartbroken, absolutely devastated. Obviously, this does not mean that college football is canceled for the fall. From my perspective as a Colorado student, I'm looking at my grad cap right now because I'm still in my childhood bedroom. I'm very sad there won't be a Colorado football season in the fall. I was planning on going back and visiting and going to a game or two. I mean, not going to a game or two, but being there on a Saturday for a football game. It is such an important part of our culture at our school, obviously. I mean, I think we can all agree going to a big football school definitely impacts the way you spend your weekends in the fall. I think of my weekends, and it's Saturday is game day and Sunday is recovery from game day. And now it's just, I don't know what people are going to do during the fall, because so many people align their whole lives for college football. And I definitely thought that I didn't come across as sad as I truly was. I wanted to be more level-headed about it. And I do understand that there's a pandemic going on. But I'm also very realistic in knowing that there are bigger things in the world right now than college football being canceled, football being canceled. I know that is just a large chunk of the world is sad about that right now. And college football is not canceled yet, I have to say. As we'll get into today, there are 3 conferences still playing. But, yeah, I've had time to react to everything. I'm mostly just sad. And really, I don't know, if you had told us back in March I wouldn't have football for my last year of college, I don't know how I'd feel. I'd be very sad about it, obviously, but I think that I've had time to react, and I've kind of realized that this is ultimately for the safety of the players and the other students at the school, and we do have to remember that there are thousands of other students at these schools, and with students coming back in the next few weeks, I know my sorority house girls just moved in there yesterday and today, so it's just a lot to think about. It kind of makes me just sad, mostly, not knowing what the fall is going to be like, which we will get into. Yeah, if you have lived under a rock for the past week, lost your phone broke, you lost your memory, I don't know. The Big Ten and the Pac-12 postponed their season. So that means that Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC are still continuing to play. So we have 3 out of the 5 Power 5 conferences continuing to play. I think it's no question that these conferences, as I've said, I don't think this is a political comment to make. I don't think this is personally, I'm sorry if it offends anyone, but some of the big teams from these conferences are in hot spots where the coronavirus is. Alabama athletic director just came out with a comment today saying that they want fall football and they will push forward with fall football, and obviously everybody does, but I think it's only coincidental, which we will get into here later in this segment, that the places with the highest number of coronavirus rates that are growing rapidly are host to some of these schools. I mean, you can look, Knoxville, Tennessee has one of the highest rates of COVID cases climbing in the past week. Texas especially, I know I have a friend that goes to TT Austin, and she has told me that since she's gone back to campus, rates have been climbing and she doesn't feel safe there right now and she regrets going back. But I don't think that's a political thing to say. I don't think that is something that's controversial. I mean, it could be controversial in the sense of I'm associating the Pac-12 and the Big Ten canceling their season with their in safer regions of the country, which isn't true because the California school districts, I know my sister who goes to school out here in public school, she's not going back in the fall. Most schools out here are doing fall semesters. Cases are climbing in LA, in that area, and in Colorado cases are climbing as well. So I'm not saying that the 3 conferences left only have the high rates, and the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are doing everything they can because overall, like, each state is different. But I think that it is not really coincidental that these 3 conferences host some of the bigger hotspots of the country. But you can also look at it and think that the SEC, I think of this specifically, is football. Like, when I was younger and I was looking at colleges, this is such a superficial way to view colleges, but I literally viewed it as, well, who has the best football? And that was Georgia, LSU, Alabama, Mississippi, Auburn. I only ended up applying to Georgia and Alabama out of those schools, but I mean, I was really only considering Southern schools because that was what they had. I mean, that was it. And I heard reports, I mean, I was listening to Ryan Russillo's podcast, which I feel like I'll mention because he had a really good insight on everything right after it happened. And he was kind of talking about how he goes to LSU Alabama game every single year, and leading up to that, every game each weekend in Tuscaloosa, it is football. Like, that is all there is. And for a lot of companies around that area as well, that's their revenue. That's how they make money. 3 months out of the year, 3-4 months is their whole revenue that they stockpile to use over for the rest of the year. And so I think football is important to everybody, but especially in the South. I mean, they live, breathe, eat football. There's no question about that. And that's amazing. But also during this time, you have to wonder if people are putting their desire to watch football over the health and safety of their community and their family, because it's not just about you, it's about other people. But without getting too political there, I guess I'm just not really sure what the medical staff from the latter 3 conferences see that these 2 didn't see that make it okay to play football. Obviously, each conference has its own commissioner, and each school has its own medical staff, so ultimately it's up to them. But I know the ACC medical expert came out and said that he sees things that can make football safe to play, but I'm wondering what he saw that, like, the Pac-12 or Big Ten commissioner didn't see, because the Pac-12 commissioner came out and said that, like, this is not safe. So he got that from his medical experts. So just things to wonder. I do feel really bad for the players. I know that for a lot of them, this is their last season, and it's just very heartbreaking because so many of them could have the chance to go to the NFL, and now they won't have a season. I mean, obviously, there's a potential for a spring season, but they really only started discussing a spring season on Tuesday when they only started discussing a spring season on Tuesday when the Big Ten and Pac-12 had to postpone their season. I say you postpone because that's their plan right now. They do want to figure out a way to play in the spring, but I forget what podcast I was listening to. I think it was Titus and Tate from Fox Sports. If you don't listen to them, it's really entertaining. and they were joking about having winter football, and I think that'd be kind of entertaining. They put Wisconsin in winter football. But yeah, I think that I just feel bad for the players. I know for so many of them, I know for Colorado kids as well, it's just really heartbreaking because a lot of them, even if they weren't going to the NFL draft, even if they weren't going to try to go pro after, this was for a lot of them their last year to play, and it just stinks. Obviously, they'll be able to keep their scholarship and their eligibility, but it's a sucky situation for all. I think a lot of reason these kids go to these schools is for football, and now you're kind of taking that away, and it's like, well, now what? Obviously, they're going to try and go back to school for some of them, unless our campuses are all online, but it just stinks. Like I said, I feel like I came off not too unhappy, but I'm not going to lie and say I wasn't expecting this, because as soon as rumors started to rumble that the Pac-12 and Big Ten were considering canceling, well, it was first the Big Ten, when they were considering postponing the season, I kind of knew, like, okay, well, it was when the MAC, honestly, canceled their season, because the MAC is not a Power 5 school per se, but it was the first big conference to cancel. And so once the MAC did that, you kind of had to realize that, okay, like, this school, they don't have the boosters and everything, and they're still canceling their season. Like, other conferences are going to start doing this. But I was expecting this, which really stinks to think about that. But this is their life, and for so many, this is their only opportunity to make it big. And that can go back to the age-old discussion of, like, should we pay players or whatever, and comes down to the fact that you would be having these unpaid athletes who we now see, based on all the money coming out and the statistics, that they really are employees of the university, and having them not play, not being paid to play a sport where they could potentially contract the virus and have heart issues for the rest of their life and other health issues. It just stinks. But speaking of that, let's get into a big, I don't know if it was big per se, but a news item that came out earlier today. Yesterday, excuse me. It is Thursday, August 13th, when this news came out. And so on last week's episode, I touched on the Colorado State controversy that's going on right now. Colorado State has canceled their season, but the rumors surrounding their player health and personnel and hiding tests, and I kind of said that this is not the last we're going to hear of it. If this is happening at a small school like Colorado State, this is bound to be happening at other schools. And so we had the Florida State news come out yesterday, and I have in my notes, was I right or was I right? I don't mean to sound like that at all. I don't mean to be like one of those I told you so people. I was just thinking realistically. And so star wide receiver Tamarin Terry, he's publicly spoke out about the lack of transparency in coronavirus testing at their school. DJ Matthews, a member of the Florida State Seminoles, tweeted Wednesday that he tested positive for COVID-19, but the tweet was deleted. He followed Thursday morning with a second tweet suggesting lies within the program. Terry retweeted Matthews and offered his vague comments concerning, "I can't believe this." I think it stinks having to hide players' health and safety because you want to play football. Obviously, this is, again, a corporation and a business, but we shouldn't be hiding these players' health and personal safety. Here's an issue that here's a quote that Thompson wrote on Twitter. "Our leadership is based off an I mentality, with them only worried about their own future rather than their own athletes," Thompson wrote. "I have been ridiculed about speaking up regarding this issue, and it needs to be addressed for myself to safely continue the season." So as this ESPN article goes on to report, many larger schools, including Clemson, Michigan, and Oklahoma, have offered aggravated testing numbers. Florida State has not announced any data, and as many of you probably know, Florida is the hotspot for COVID right now. Numbers are rising there. And Tallahassee is part of that, but it does kind of stink. I can't say I'm surprised, but I just feel really bad for these players that are being told to hide their virus. And here's another excerpt from the article that ESPN released. According to one close source close to the situation, the concerns reached a boiling point when Florida State Athletic Director David Corbin said Tuesday that the state school will be doing weekly testing during a roundtable discussion with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. In fact, the school is not tested that often throughout the summer, and the testing results have been largely kept private, even from players. Neither Norvell or Corbin immediately corrected the information. Additional concerns were raised when Matthews tested positive for COVID-19 on Wednesday. Players believed Matthew had felt sick prior to testing, but was able to participate in position meetings, which led to quarantine for others. So by being told to keep quiet, Matthews potentially infected other members of his team and had them quarantine, which slows down the practice time and makes the team less functional. And the problem for me is the people in charge of the athletic department, specifically the football team, thinking that it is okay to cover up serious illnesses like this. It's one thing to say you have the flu and keep going, because I think we've all been there where we felt sick but kept pushing through something. But when there's a virus like the COVID-19 situation going around, I personally do not believe it is okay for schools to be hiding this kind of information. And how does that make their students feel that are coming back to the campus? I don't think that, if I was a student at Florida State, I wouldn't feel safe knowing that, well, players on the football team are testing positive, but they're not allowed to say anything. So they're going to class, they're walking around campus, they're potentially infecting other members of our community. And this is not the last we'll hear of these stories. I can't stress that enough. I really do think in the next few weeks we will hear about other big schools having stories like this break out. And another big issue, I don't know if it's an issue per se, but Donald Trump, our president, spoke out on playing college football because of the money at stake. He didn't say that directly, but he did tweet, let them play. I'm pretty sure the tweet was, or play college football. And I think it's no secret that Trump is supporting the college football for the money aspect. Who knows? He's a diehard Alabama fan. But I want to read an excerpt again from an NBC News article I read this morning. The conferences that canceled their seasons this week are the Big Ten and Pac-12, and their schools are primarily made up of Democratic states with Democratic governors: Illinois, California, Oregon, Washington, spreading all the way to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Colorado. There's a Nebraska, Iowa, Utah university in there too. And it's worth noting that Nebraska momentarily threatened to play football without the Big Ten. But the crossover between states that were most careful with their COVID-19 reopenings and states where football has been canceled is undeniably substantial. So, yes, I think it's important to note in that article that the crossover with, I'm not saying, I don't want to get political here, but the states, California has not been the best at reopening per se, but the states that are reopening and not taking it as safely are the states that are playing college football. And I, again, don't mean to get political here. I really don't want to turn this into like a Republican or Democrat issue. This is an issue of health and safety, in my opinion. And regardless of your political views, I think it's very fair to point out that the states that are not taking it as seriously and are really trying to make life go back to normal as soon as possible without taking proper social distancing precautions are the ones that are playing college football. And people will look at the Big 12 as a swing conference. So if you guys didn't know, the Big 12 is kind of in the middle, I guess, of all this, because the ACC and SEC released on Tuesday statements announcing their intents to keep playing, and the Big 12 did not say if they were going to keep playing or not until Tuesday night. And so the Big 12 is kind of the swing state, because if the Big 12 decided not to play, then it would be foolish for the SEC and ACC to continue playing, but they did not release a statement. So this article further goes on to say that Mississippi State's Tate Reeves and Georgia's Brian Kemp, which are their governors, explicitly listed having college football as a reason for their citizens to wear a mask, is telling that neither man could come up with a more alarming prospect to their voters than an autumn without college football, which I think is very true. If college football is the only thing motivating you to wear a mask and be safe out there, then I personally think you need to reevaluate your personal priorities in life, because I obviously want college football, but I am not wearing a mask out in public. I am not social distancing. I'm not protecting others and protecting myself in general just for college football in the fall. Trump tweeted that the students and athletes have been working so hard for their season to be canceled, but the decision to keep unpaid college athletes still sweating and breathing heavily in locker rooms should not be seen as a sign of generosity, nor is it an example of stalwart, stiff upper lipsness, stay the courseness. Think of it more as aligned with states reopening public schools. The state of Georgia is seeing a more consistent increase in positive coronavirus cases, but Kemp is encouraging schools to plunge ahead, stay open for in-person schooling anyways, as is the University of Georgia itself. So that, again, was from NBC News. Take that with what you will. I thought it was a very interesting article to point out just because there's a lot of correlation there with the states that are opening and the states that are playing college football versus the states that are kind of going back into shutdown. I mean, again, I can think of California in specific. We're not going back into full shutdown per se, but things are closing. Gyms are closed here. We're not able to eat indoors anymore. And you look at states like Georgia, studios are open. We're eating indoors. And I don't think that it's like foolish. I think that you're really naive if you don't look at it like that. And again, it's not trying to be political or anything, but with an upcoming election this fall, you definitely have to consider what states lean which way and how Trump is using his platform to sway the votes. And that is all I'm going to say on that, because this is not a political podcast and I'm really not trying to cause any controversies here. I'm just giving my opinion. And again, I'm sorry if I ruffled any feathers here, but I think you just gotta say what you gotta say. And some more news that came out today is the Big Sky, the Big Sky, the WCC, and the WAC postponed their seasons. Postpone is the word that the Pac-12, Big Ten, the MAC, the Mountain West, all these conferences are using, but a spring season does seem a little unlikely because the reason for the Pac-12 and Big Ten shutdown, despite conferences only play decision, was because it was too risky and logistically they could not do it. And so according to a lot of reports, commissioners didn't even discuss the idea of spring football until Tuesday. So there's a lot of questions here. I mean, how's the TV schedule going to work? How are we going to, I don't know, just so many questions here, but it's definitely a lot to think about. Again, I'm not trying to sound too depressing or too pessimistic about everything, but I think it's very valuable to know what is going on in the world. And coming up, you guys, we got a very fun segment for you all. We are going to be looking forward, looking at college football playoffs, what the heck is going to happen, and then also what TVs should do with their time slots they have now, because if the Pac-12 and Big Ten are shut down for the season, there's definitely a lot of airtime that networks have to fill. So came up with a few little ideas, so stay tuned for that.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that little commercial break there. So, as I said, we have a bunch to go over in this segment. And first, I want to kick it off with a little fun topic, if you will. As I mentioned, there are so much airtime that we need to fill in the world right now because of coronavirus. And if the Pac-12 and Big Ten do not play, which they're not playing, they've confirmed that, what's going to happen if college football is canceled in general. And so before we get into kind of moving forward, spring football, college football playoff, all that fun jazz, I thought it'd be really fun to go through some ideas that I came up with. And so these are little TV segments they could do. Think of it as like The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary that ESPN put out early in quarantine. Was it early in quarantine? By the way, are you still calling it quarantine, or are you just saying we live in a pandemic? Because I want to say for the first 2 months, I came home March 19th, I want to say. And for the first 2 months, I was saying I was in quarantine. I quarantined for the first 2 weeks after I got back. I did not see anybody. But I guess since then I've kind of just said, like, we're living in a pandemic and we're social distancing. I do know a lot of people who are still quarantining. In fact, I literally just got a group chat from a text from a group chat I'm in talking about getting together tonight for socially distant, like, happy hour. And one person was like, no, I can't. Like, I'm literally not seeing anybody but my family. And so I want to know kind of what you guys are doing to stay safe. I think the biggest thing I've done to stay safe and sane in general is FaceTimes. Actually, a really fun thing I've discovered through my boyfriend is the iPhone games you can play. So if anyone here has an iPhone, which I assume most of you might, if you have an Android, there's something wrong with that. But they're like the little iPhone games, like mini golf, cup pong. I think there's bowling, there's archery, there's paintball. You just send them in a text, and it's so much fun. It actually keeps you really connected to people. And it's just a little thing, because if you're like me and you are a bad texter, that if my friends, if anyone's listening to this, they know how bad of a texter I am. I currently have 1,430 unread texts, it says on my phone. But it just connects you with people, and so that's something I really recommend if you are looking to stay connected to your people. I know that I personally don't love FaceTiming. I just much rather see the person in person. But right now, that's not really an option. I definitely have started seeing people very socially distant. I have been for a while. But yeah. Anyways, little tangent there. I was just wondering if you're still calling it quarantine or like if you're in a pandemic. Anyways, back to what I was saying. So back in early quarantine, ESPN released the Michael Jordan 30 for 30 documentary. Is it a 30 for 30 documentary? It's The Last Dance, which is 10-part miniseries. And I thought it'd be really cool if ESPN did a whole 30 for 30 on the Alabama-Auburn rivalry. I don't know why this rivalry fascinates me so much. It just really does. I can't describe it. I truly don't know what it is, but there's just something about it where I'm just fascinated by it. And I think it'd be really cool to do like a 3-4-part miniseries. Netflix, if you want to get on this too, Netflix, if you are listening. But they also, I assume they'll be replaying some classic games. I mean, ESPN Classics already does that, but some classic games. And here's my idea, guys. This is like my all-star breadwinning idea. GSMC, if you would like to sponsor this and start a GoFundMe to get this going, I can contact people. But, sorry. I'm going to be referencing a lot of pop culture things here. Give me 5 minutes to nerd out. So if anyone knows what Big Brother is, it is a reality show competition where you put, I think it's 20 contestants. It's 15 to 20 contestants in a big house for 3 months. They have no access to the outside world. It's live as well. So every week we're watching live reality show. And there are no phones, no books, no magazines, no anything. You don't know what's going on in the outside world. And you are trapped in this house for 3 months straight. And you're competing for $100,000. So I had an idea to put all the star quarterbacks in one house, Big Brother style, and have them compete. But instead of prize money, because they are amateur athletes that cannot accept money, we give them an automatic top 10 pick in the NFL draft. So winning this Big Brother tournament would guarantee, I mean, this is very wishy-washy. You can't guarantee someone's going to be a pick, but guaranteed top 10 pick in the NFL draft. That'd be a fun little prize to get. So you'd have Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Spencer Rattler, Sam Ehlinger, JT Daniels, etc. And some games that I came up with is you could do a throwing contest, a classic sling the ball, like at the games where they have the Dr. Pepper halftime shows and you have to sling the ball. I'm doing a hand motion you guys can't see, but you have to sling the ball into a net. I think it is, and you win scholarship money. I think that's how it works. I want to say that's how it works. I'm not sure, though. And you have a maze. I love mazes. I don't know why, a corn maze fascinates me. I was never really allowed to go in them as a kid. I grew up in San Diego, California. We didn't have corn mazes, okay? Our pumpkin patches usually happened when it was 100 degrees outside in fall. And you were wearing shorts and a tank top and you were sweating. I remember I would see teen girls going to take pictures there and you would just sweat the whole time. It was miserable. And so what was that laugh? I think it'd be really fun to do a Big Brother style. This would be for the quarterbacks that aren't playing the season. And this would also logistically have to work out with their school. Maybe they take a semester off of school. Maybe this is after they graduate. Or it'd be fun if we put coaches, get a Nick Saban in there, Mike Leach, Mike Gundy, I'm David. I am blanking on his last name, from Stanford. I think that'd be pretty fun to do. What do you guys think? GSMC bosses, if you're listening to this and you think this is a genius idea, let me know. I will draft a full plan for it and submit it. But anyways, let's get on into the important stuff here, because there are obviously more important things to talk about than a Big Brother style competition for college football. So let's first talk about eligibility for spring football, because a big question is, well, what about the players? Would they be eligible for spring football? And the answer is yes. That's probably the simplest answer so far that's come out of all this, is that their eligibility will simply roll over, which is very nice. Obviously, you're going to have players that graduate early or players that opt out completely, which, again, we will get into. It's just weird. I don't know. We have a spring football game at Boulder, but I don't think anyone truly goes to it. People do, but just spring football feels so weird, like kicking off on like Labor Day and ending on Memorial Day. Gosh, that's weird. But again, we will get into that. So for spring football, the big question is, what about the players that are going to the NFL draft? How will that work? And they will most likely have to opt out. For schools like Ohio State and Oregon, they have players waiting in the wings. Big programs like that, they are prepared. But you have to look at schools having their best players opt out would give them less of a competitive advantage, which, looking at the landscape, if only the Pac-12 and the Big Ten did play spring football, that would definitely take away a lot of the competitive landscape there. But again, this is a sacrifice you have to make. I mean, if we started in, say, like February or something, and then late April, you have the NFL draft and you have Justin Fields being like, peace out, would his backup just come in and replace him after this season? I mean, would he even play? I feel like the kids that know they're going to be a first-round draft pick, like, are certain they're going to be given, like, a crazy injury or, like, a slide like Laramie Tunsil a few years ago. They're going to opt out of spring football just because they want that money and they don't want to get injured, which makes sense. I think it does stink that at that point they do have to consider their career as an NFL player over playing their final college football season, which is something that I don't think any of them want to consider. But, I mean, those paychecks. And this would mean that if we had spring football, the 2021 season would kick off later. So around Halloween or so, have the 2022 college football playoffs happen around February, and then season would kind of start normally. So they get a break. So if we had spring football, you would have about a year of not chaos per se, but difference, I guess, is that the right word? Yeah, that makes sense. And you and the ACC and SEC maintain that they're going to play while we waited for the Big 12 to make a decision, which I touched on in the last segment. But the Big 12 was really the dynamo that kept on falling. The pendulum, is that the right word? Is pendulum the right word, people? What's the thing that, like, teeters? Like the brick? Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm wrong here. But they were kind of the thing that people were waiting for to see what would happen and how that would determine the playoffs. And so, yes. Now that the Big 12 has said they will play, it looks like for now, I mean, it's not certain that we're going to have fall football. It's hope, and hope is really all we have right now. And so we just have to cling on to hope and truly hope for the best and pray that we have it. But spring football would be really weird. I'm not going to lie, the concept of it. Football just feels like a fall sport, you know? Like, if anyone here is a big Taylor Swift fan, then you would know that a few weeks ago, I think it's been about 3 weeks, she released her album Folklore, which is such a fall album. You listen to it and you want to put on scarves and drink your pumpkin spice lattes and curl up beside a fireplace. That's what football feels like. Saturday night football, I imagine it getting dark at like 5 p.m. You sit around the fire, like the TV with your family. You have pizza, you have wings, you have nachos, you pig out on food. You feel so gross about yourself the next morning, but it's okay. And there's something so comforting about that from my perspective, because after Christmas, I don't know about you guys, but after Christmas, I'm like, all right, like, we're only eating kale and cauliflower for the next 6 months. Like, we're not eating pizza and nachos here. And part of the comfort of college football is that feeling of just vegging out on the couch for a day. And then the NFL is the next day. So you have these 2 days where you don't leave the couch. And it just feels so good. And then there's also, like, the weather is getting worse, so you want to be inside more and you just want to be on your TV. Whereas spring football, I mean, the weather's getting better. It's nicer out. You want to be outside. Vacations are happening. This is, again, all presuming the world is kind of back to normal. Yeah. So what will the college football playoff look like? As you may have listened to in my first episode I ever did for GSMC as a lovely new intern, I had Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. So, little weird, but not much has changed with my top 10, with my college football playoff, I have to say, since the news broke that Pac-12 and Big Ten will not be playing. I'm always so scared I'm going to mess those up and sound like an idiot on here, just because, I don't know, I'm just so used to saying them, but for the college football playoffs, Clemson and Alabama are the most likely teams to make it. Again, nothing is a given in college football, but Clemson is set to start the season at 9-4 to make the odds. Alabama is at 6-1 odds. Georgia and LSU are in 8-1 odds. So, my new top 4. Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, and Oklahoma. It's not that different. I know, say what you will, but I have Oklahoma getting in over Ohio State, now that Ohio State is out of the options. So let's go over a few things here when discussing the playoffs. Number one is that nothing is a given in college football, and the pandemic will change a lot of things. So there are going to be games that are canceled. There are going to be postponements. There are going to be weeks we don't have football. Injuries. Players could get COVID and be sidelined, and this is not going to be a normal college football season, and we have to admit that to ourselves, but let's assume that these rankings are going along as if the season was 100% normal. First off, just gotta say that Oklahoma I didn't have in originally because I thought that, Ohio State, first of all, so dominant. Justin Fields was going to contend for the Heisman this year. It didn't feel like a no-brainer, but they were the Big Ten team that I was putting in. And I had Georgia in there just because I thought Georgia with JT Daniels, their new quarterback, Kirby Smart, is in his third year, I believe, there. And so the system is very implemented there, and it's not old. People know about it. So I had Ohio State over Oklahoma, but now looking back, obviously we have to put a new team in for Ohio State. So I put Oklahoma because this will be Lincoln Riley's third year as a head coach, fully comfortable with the system. Oklahoma did lose Jalen Hurts, but they replaced him with Spencer Rattler, who is already one of the favorites for the Heisman. Their home games are against rivals Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Baylor. Riley has the offensive weapons in Rattler and Denzel Williams. And it comes down to the same argument every year. They're going to give up a ton of points to schools like Texas Tech and UT. And will they be able to hold their ground and not have an upset derail them? Now, this is what I thought. They would have a few upsets that would derail them. But now we have to think about the fact it's conference only. It's going to be less games. I believe it's a 10 or 11. I believe it's an 11-game season that they're playing. And just with I think the college football committee is going to look at this season a whole lot differently than they would have if this was a normal season and all the teams are playing. And so Alabama, really quickly, Mac Jones, the Nick Saban aspect, the revenge aspect, I think that is very clear. Alabama's going to want revenge over missing it last year, and I would too. Georgia, you have JT Daniels, you have their fire defense, and Clemson, nothing is a given in college football. I remember talking about this when I interviewed for GSMC. Nothing is a given in college football. Clemson feels like it is as close to a given as there can be, and nothing is a given again, but Trevor Lawrence, in what is presumably his last year before he declares for the NFL draft, you have Dabo Swinney, you have Travis Etienne returning for their senior season. They're stacked on the offensive side, and they just feel like a surefire, are going to get in. And if you listen to the pod when I first heard it out, you knew that I had Ohio State there in Oklahoma. This season is going to skew how people perceive the best college football team. I think some people that aren't as invested in college football will realize that Ohio State and Oregon who were also slated at the playoff spots. Basically what I'm trying to say is that people that aren't as invested in college football are just going to say that the teams that make it this season, if there's a playoff season, are just going to say, well, these are the best teams. They're not going to take into account the fact that Ohio State and Oregon are out of the mix, and other teams like USC, Penn State, Michigan, and Washington, they were going to compete as well. And these collectively between the three conferences playing, those will be the best teams. But you're missing 2 conferences with a lot of powerhouses. And this also brings up a question of, will it be a fair college football season? I put fair in very big quotation marks on my outline. So fair in the sense of the word right now, we have three conferences playing: the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12. We won't see all the teams, like I previously mentioned, like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Washington, USC, Colorado, obviously, ASU, Arizona State. We won't see all these teams that could be in contention as well to make a splash, upset these teams, get a big bowl game. And a lot of these players have opted out as well. And I think if you're a fan of the teams competing in the playoffs, you will see this as a fair season. But if your team is not, then you won't. And that just goes along straight with like bias, obviously. If, say, the SEC opted out and the Pac-12 had it and Colorado somehow made the college football playoffs, I would say, yeah, this is completely fair. When Alabama and Georgia and Auburn didn't have a chance to compete for the title, for the playoffs. So it just depends. Fans of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, they're all going to think this is not a fair season because their teams could have had a shot and they're not going to, which just stinks. So this is definitely going to be a different college football season. I don't think there'll be an asterisk on the winner of this season in terms of the playoffs, but I definitely think that when we look back on this season of college football, historians and analysts are definitely going to touch on the fact that it was a weird season. This is definitely the weirdest time we've had in college football. I can't really remember a time in my lifetime where there was this much uncertainty around a season. I think we really took for granted how much of a privilege college football was, because for such a long time it was just something that was a given and it happened and you didn't think anything of it. And now it's, well, is it even going to happen? What's going on in the world? Who knows? Who knows? So let's recap super quickly everything I went over. We have spring football and what will happen with all the players and draft eligibility, which I touched on, and thankfully their eligibility for spring football, if they do decide to play, is not in question too much. And players that choose to opt out for the NFL, I understand, chase that money, I guess. It does stink that they have to consider their NFL career or their last season as a player at their school. We touched on the college football playoffs and my new teams, which are Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Georgia. What do you guys think of that? I almost said, do you think it's fair I'm leaving the Big 10 and Pac-12 off? But obviously I am, because they're not playing this fall, which is just surreal to think about. But yes, and then I personally believe Oklahoma has a pretty good chance, as I will get into in my third segment coming up next. The Big 12 is stacked with players, but I think it's going to be a really interesting season. The question of if it's a fair season is definitely going to come into play. I believe that it's not going to be a normal season, and so I don't know if it's going to be fair in that sense. I think that if it was a completely normal season, obviously we would find it fair, but there's always going to be the people that are skeptical. There's always going to be people that are going to say, well, Ohio State was better than XYZ, and oh, this team should have gotten in over that team when the college football playoff rankings come out, because their teams aren't playing. So coming up, everybody, stay tuned, because we are continuing our previewing of conferences. We are back after an episode off with the Big 12. So stay tuned for that.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back, everybody, for our third segment of the show. We have gone over what is going on in college football, all the updates. I feel like the first segment is always kind of just a rundown on news, thoughts, the whole shebang, especially given the COVID-19 pandemic. Gosh, it still feels weird even, like, is it 6 months later? I mean, we're in the 8th. Yeah, it's about 6 months later that we're still living in a pandemic. I feel like this is what our ancestors lived through with, like, the Black Plague and all of that. I mean, I can't really think of anything. Well, my parents weren't alive for the Great Depression. My grandpa was. I guess the recession of 2008, but, like, I lived through that. I was 9 years old. Gosh, what is there anything like this that my parents lived through? I need to ask them. If you are someone who lived through something like this before I was born in 1999, please let me know. Let a girl know. Hit me up on social media and tell me if I'm wrong. I'm a history nerd, but maybe I have my history wrong. Who knows? Yeah, the first segment's kind of always going over pandemic news, if you will. And then we're getting back to our team previews. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is our last team preview because I spent 6 hours previewing the Big Ten. I had such a good statistics ready. I really nailed it on the head. I was so excited about my research for that, and then it got canceled, which is really sad. I was going to release that the day that my computer broke, and yes. So, on to today's preview. We have the Big 12. I always used to mistake the Big 12 and the Big 10 for the longest time. I could not tell you why, but those conferences always confuse me to no end, which makes zero sense because they're completely opposite in almost every sense of the word, but let's get to it today, people. So, what do you think of when you think of the Big 12? I usually think of UT Austin, Matthew McConaughey, obviously. Oklahoma, as I said, my tennis coach played tennis there, so I have a little affinity for it. And TCU, kind of random, Texas Christian University. There's a joke going around on TikTok, for all you millennials or Gen Z. I guess I'm technically Gen Z. Am I technically Gen Z? My boyfriend said my boyfriend is 24, and he says he's a millennial, and I'm a Gen Z, but I'm 21. I feel like I'm both because there's a lot of millennial jokes I understand, but there's also a lot of Gen Z jokes I get, but I feel like it's an insult to be Gen Z. And isn't there like a Gen X now or something? Like there's a new generation. I digress. But there's like a TikTok joke going around. It's like, oh, where do kids in Southern California go to school? And all the TikToks are like Boulder and TCU, which is so accurate. I know a girl from the year above me in high school went to TCU. She just graduated. I don't think anyone from my grade went to TCU, but I know so many people from like around me that I'm friends with, or I have friends of friends that went there. It is such a common San Diego school. And for some reason, I always think of that school when I think of the Big 12. Also, because one of my best friends, Paige, just started medical school there at TCU. So go her. She has her life in order. I do not. And so I actually plan on visiting TCU this fall. If the world is safe and I'm allowed to do so, I will be visiting TCU. So maybe I can do like a live pod from a TCU game where there'll be no fans. Actually, I believe the state of Texas is allowing fans at the games. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know Oklahoma is allowing 25% capacity of fans. I digress. We are getting into a tangent now. But I think of those three schools. Obviously, you have Baylor, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Iowa. Forgetting a bunch of schools here, but yes. So at the Pac-12 and the Big 10 out for the fall, it's the Big 12's time to shine. And why do I say that, people? Because I feel like the Big 12 gets all the attention taken away from them. Maybe it's the region I live in where, again, this sounds so weird to say, but like I really think of the SEC and the Pac-12. Because the SEC, I feel like everyone thinks of when they think of football. You think of Alabama and LSU and Auburn and Georgia and Mississippi State, Arkansas, Vanderbilt even. But when I don't know, Pac-12, obviously I grew up on the West Coast. I don't really think of the Big Ten that much, even though I applied to so many Big Ten schools. Did I get into any of them? No, because you have to be smart to go there, and I was not smart in high school. I'm smart now, though. But it's the Big 12's time to shine. They're often looked over, I feel like, by not analysts, because they do have some very talented teams, but just people. Again, I feel like everyone has those two conferences they think of when they think of college football, and for me, that's the SEC and the Pac-12. And so, let's get into it. So I've touched so much on the Oklahoma Sooners, University of Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner, I guess you can say. They made the playoffs last year, but got demolished in the first game, which, don't mind me, you guys. I completely have this wrong. Oh gosh. Why do I have this completely wrong? This is so weird. Peach Bowl. There we go. They played in the Peach Bowl against LSU, the Louisiana State Tigers, and then got destroyed 63-28. Wow, that was embarrassing. Couldn't remember what bowl game they played in. I always get that in the Cotton Bowl mixed up. Don't know why. But Oklahoma is stacked this year, let me tell you. So we have Spencer Rattler, who I touched on in a quarterback preview a few weeks ago. So if you're interested in a more deep dive on Spencer Rattler and Heisman hopefuls, go check him out because he is definitely a Heisman hopeful to keep your eye out for. He is seen as an early preseason Heisman favorite. How many times can I say Heisman? They lost Jalen Hurts. There's no question about that. But with Rattler in the picture, I think there's so much hope for this season. This is Lincoln Riley's third season as a coach in Norman, Oklahoma, and his system is finally planted and cemented there in Norman. So they have Kennedy Brooks, I'm pretty sure that's how you say his name, leading the way for the running backs in Norman because they lost Jalen Hurts' 1,300 yards and 20 TDs on the ground to the Philadelphia Eagles. And Trey Sermon and his 2,500 scrimmage yards are now with the Ohio State Buckeyes. So they lost a lot of production on the ground this past season. Sorry. They lost a ton of production on the ground this past season in the off season. But that doesn't mean they don't have a chance to shine. They're going to have their stadium at 25% capacity, which I feel like that can mean something. I don't know if you're someone that looks into home field advantage and teams having fans there. I definitely look into it and consider it, but that's not the determination of a team's success. And they spent the 2019 season rebuilding their offensive line, and now because they lost a bunch of their offensive line to the NFL draft, and now with 2020 here, they have grown and matured, and they've gotten more used to each other. And so one person on the team that we have to highlight and profile is Creed Humphrey, who is the center, who is their center. So if you're a big trenches gal like I am, I do love a good offensive or defensive line. He was a finalist for the Oklahoma Ringling Trophy, which is for one of the best offensive linemen in the country. He didn't allow a single sack last season on nearly 800 plays and registered 23 knockdowns, which is crazy. He was named the Big 12's co-offensive lineman of the year by the conference's coaches, which tells you a lot about how everyone thinks of him in the Big 12, which offensive line, especially in the Big 12, which is such an offensive-heavy league, is so important to think about. He was also a first-team All-Big 12 selection and is on the short list for first-team All-American honors this season as a registered junior. He's been able to protect Spencer Rattler, and I think it's clear that their offense is going to be booming this season under Lincoln Riley and Norman, and having fans in the stadium, I do believe will give them a little bit of a competitive edge. How much of a competitive edge, that is left to, I guess that's up to you. I have always been someone that likes having fans. I remember during my competitive ice skating days, which so long ago, they literally feel like a lifetime ago. Like, I think I was 14 when I stopped figure skating. I always loved having people in the stands, like, cheering me on and giving me support, and like having my parents to run out to after, and my coaches. And obviously competitive figure skating fans are nowhere near Oklahoma Sooner fans, but having people in the stadium definitely helps. I think that even if there aren't fans in the stadiums, I've heard rumors about implementing like sound and noise just to give it more of a feel like there's fans in the stadiums. But it sounds like right now Texas and Oklahoma are two states that are allowing fans to be at the games at somewhat of a capacity, and also like red and ticket holders, season ticket holders are going to get their shot at tickets first. But now that we've gone over Oklahoma once again, let's get on to the UT Austin Longhorns, the Texas Longhorns, Matthew McConaughey's alma mater. My friend actually has tried to get into Matthew McConaughey's class so many times, and it fills up so quickly every single time. So if anyone is taking that class and wants to give a little insight onto what it is like, please let me know. But Texas has star quarterback Sam Ehlinger, who I previewed a few weeks ago, again in the Heisman potential profile I did, but go check him out if you want to hear more about him there. He's an incredibly accurate passer. He's truly only gotten better over his years at Texas, and he led them to their first bowl win in quite some time last year. He's a Heisman hopeful, and they are on the historic verge of a program comeback with the dominance of Tom Herman there as their coach. So Texas is really on the rise. I feel like they were a laughingstock for a few years there at the end of Mac Brown's tenure. They were not seen as truly a competitive team, which does stink because there's so much history there with the team, but historic program on the verge of coming back with dominance thanks to Tom Herman. And now let's get into Oklahoma State. The Oklahoma State Cowboys. It always feels weird to say that, but they have Chuba Howard, who is seen as the best running back in the country behind Travis Etienne of Clemson. Travis Etienne was a top 10 running back last season who opted to stay in the college football for one more season to improve his draft stock, which was a very good idea. Let us forget they have Mike Gundy, the mullet guy, the mullet man. And Chuba Howard was the nation's leading rusher in 2019. He had 2,094 yards. He was a workhorse in every sense of the word. 328 carries, 21 touchdowns, was number one in the FBS. He averaged 6.4 yards per attempt and led the Big 12 at 3.7 yards after contact per rushing attempt. He's very good in open space, and he's once again primed to put up video game-like numbers on an offense that should contend with one of college football's best. So Oklahoma State, as you can already see, they're going to be primed with having one of the best offenses in college football. And then we have Tylan Wallace, who is seen as the best wide receiver in the Big 12, because last year CeeDee Lamb was unquestionably the Big 12's best wideout, but had Wallace been healthy for a whole year, he would have been in the conversation. He was the conference's leading wide receiver with 903 yards and 8 touchdowns at the time of his ACL injury in early November. With Lamb gone to the NFL to the Dallas Cowboys, Wallace, a senior, emerges as the Big 12's top pass catcher. He is first among returning wide receivers in broken tackles, touchdowns, yard per game, and is second in receiver rating. He has just 2 drops and 62 catchable targets. He's a yards after catch stud. And again, I want to thank Sports Illustrated for giving me that little excerpt there. So as you can see with Tylan Wallace and Chuba Howard, their offense is going to be loaded. But let's talk about the quarterback game, because we all love talking about quarterback. Quarterbacks are a fun position to talk about. There's no question about that. And we have Spencer Saunders at QB, who, what we saw from his freshman season in 2018, there was some good, there was some great, and there was some not that great, honestly. He was injured in the third act of the 2019 season, and he is really the most experienced quarterback they have there. I think it's fair to say that they had some experienced backups there last year, but really, Shane Ellinger, the true freshman, he's going to be the backup for Sanders, who has been a little injury prone in the past, but also Illingsworth is a true freshman who has never had college play, so it'll be interesting to see who they have holding the clipboard there. Sanders definitely has an interception problem. He coughed it up 14 times in his first 7 games, but for the remaining 3 outings, he had just 2 picks, and he had a brief cameo in the Texas Bowl. He has Chuba Howard and Tylan Wallace for support, which will be very helpful for the quarterback who's trying to prove something in a conference that is just littered with good quarterbacks. And next up, let's look at another team in the pack in the Big 12. We have TCU. They are a dominant defense with Trayvon Mohrig at safety. He was the best safety in the Big 12. He's considered a top guarded safety in college football in 2018. This is thanks to Pro Football Focus. He's a junior, and he is the 3rd most valuable season in the PFF college era. Let's read some of his stats thanks to Pro Football Focus. One touchdown allowed on 30 targets with 11 passes defended, a 38.71 completion percentage against 14.67 yards per game allowed, and a 29.7 quarterback rating allowed. He has 4 interceptions and had nearly a 5th. He is a blanket in TCU's 5 defensive back defense. So he is a force to be reckoned with in the backfield with the air raid system that, not air raid per se, but with the high-powered offensive systems that Tom Herman and Lincoln Riley have. It's no question that he will be a dominant force when it comes to playing those teams. And another big defensive player to look out for on the TCU side, this is on the line. This is getting down to the depths of the dirty line. We have Garrett Wallow from TCU at linebacker. So if you're looking for someone who I mean, he knows what he's doing when it comes to tackles. Wallow, a senior, has led the Big 12 and was tied for 10th nationally with 125 tackles in 2019. While his spot on the defense primarily makes him responsible for stops, he wasn't bad in pass defense either. He allowed 0 touchdowns, and he had a pick as well as a 34.03 QB rating on 18 targets. He is an example of the great job Coach Gary Patterson and his staff is doing developing athletes on the defensive side of the ball. So if you can see, TCU is really going to rely on their defense this season with their safety play, their quarterback play, as well as their line. And some other notable things I want to point out in this conference before we wrap up and get onto our top 10 list is that the Big 12 is stacked with talent. They're absolutely stacked. I mean, you can name off Iowa, Baylor, Texas, Oklahoma, so many teams. And it's easy for a team that could be 9 or 10 wins in another conference to end up with 5 or 6 wins in the Big 12, which is absolutely crazy. Not Colorado. Did Colorado used to be in the Big 12? I might have that wrong there, but pretty sure Colorado was in the Big 12 for a while. I'm going to look this up. Yes, we left in 2010. Nebraska. Okay, thank you. Thanks for my momentary pause. Colorado was in there, and I mean, I'm not saying we're the most amazing team in the world, but there's some tough teams in there. Nebraska was in there for a while, and so last year, West Virginia, Texas, Texas Tech, and Kansas, they all had 3 Big 12 wins or fewer, and all 4 came up with 2 non-conference wins as well. The other 6 teams went 16-2 in non-conference play, with the only 2 misfires, the 18-17 Iowa State loss to Iowa, and the Texas defeat to an LSU team that turned out to be just okay, just okay. Obviously, LSU really was nothing at all. I also want to correct myself because I realized I was saying that Iowa was one of the teams they were competing against, and it was actually Iowa State is in the Big 12. Iowa is in the Big 10, which I'm aware of. That was a malfunction on my brain. I misspoke there, but yeah, I just want to correct myself there. I do know what I'm talking about here, people, but the conference teams won't have the benefit of 2 of these non-conference games, so 5-5 could be a pretty good season. That is true. It's going to be 10 games, and Oklahoma is the runaway star with the most talent, the most depth, and the race system to keep the run of 5 straight Big 12 championships going. It is not going to be a walk in the park, though. Texas can definitely pull up a win versus the Sooners during the season or during the Big 12 championships. And Oklahoma State, they'll be able to hang with anyone. That offense there, they know what they are doing there. Iowa State is experienced as well, and they're going to be considered just a pesky annoyance. TCU, with their defense, they're going to make a strong start. Baylor will definitely take a step back from their success they had last year because I'm pretty sure everyone and their mother was surprised by Baylor's success last year, but they're definitely not going to be forgotten. And Kansas is going to pull off an upset somewhere because they usually do. I mean, they're not the best at football, but they always have an upset. And I'm going to read off what is considered some of the more interesting Big 12 games before we end this segment off. Texas versus Oklahoma on October 10th. Texas, Oklahoma State, October 31st. Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. Oklahoma at Iowa State. Oklahoma at TCU. Oklahoma at Kansas State. Texas at Kansas State. Oklahoma State at Kansas State, TCU at Texas. So do you notice a trend there? The teams that are making the most impact are Texas, Oklahoma, TCU, and Iowa State, as well as Kansas State. And so kind of rounding it off, my predictions for this conference, it's going to be a race between Oklahoma, Texas, and Oklahoma State. There's no doubt about that. But, however, I do have to say, I see Oklahoma coming out on top here. Don't tell them, but I do see Oklahoma coming out on top and making it to the playoffs, clearly. So that is it for your Big 12 preview of the week. Stay tuned as we try to figure out different ways to cover this football season, but let me know if you have anything else you want to hear about the different conferences. If you want me to go in on one position in general, I would love to do that. But stay tuned because coming up, we have a really fun little top 10 list here. We have the top 10 football movies and TV shows. So did your favorite make the list? Stay tuned to find out.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hello everybody, and we are back for a final segment today, a nice little top 10 list. We are rounding it off with a fun little time. I also just want to say my mom just sent the cutest picture in our family group chat, so I think I've told you guys this, but we got a new dog, and implementing her into our family has not been the easiest because we have another dog named Fiona that is a little, what's the right word? She's protective, I guess you could say, and so my mom just sent us a really cute picture of them getting along, and this makes me really happy. So, anyways, figured I would share that good news with you all because you are all so invested in my dog life, just as I am. So, anyways, let's kick it off with our top 10 best football movies and TV shows. And I think I've mentioned this, but food, TV, and movies are really like something I geek out over. I love football so much, but if you want to hear me like geek out and like talk for hours, like get me to like talk about a movie or a TV show, because when I am obsessed with a TV show, like I will not stop talking about it to all my friends and family. It is the most irritating thing for them. And so, yeah, if anyone has watched like The OC especially, I will never stop talking about how underrated and good that show is. The OC, such an iconic show. If you are a Gen Z, if you're a millennial, you need to watch it. I'm going to make my kids watch it. I'm going to sit down and be like, look, you need to watch Ryan and Marissa fall in love, and Seth and Summer, and Sandy and Kirsten. Like, you need to watch the show. That has nothing to do with football whatsoever, and I'm sure most of you are regretting staying this late in the podcast. But thanks for staying this long, people, because we got a fun little list today. So, what quantifies a football movie or TV show? It has to include football at some point. I'm not talking about, like, in the kissing booth or something when it's, like, the state championship and there's, like, one seed. No. This has to center around football in some aspect. There is one discretion on this list I will go into, but the movie can't just have one football scene and like say the guy likes football or the girl likes football and then have that be a football movie. No, this movie needs to football movie needs to center around football. So with all that, let's get into it. At number 10, we have Draft Day, the iconic 2013 movie with Kevin Costner. If I do remember correctly, this was the year Johnny Manziel was drafted, or was this the year after Johnny Manziel was drafted by the Browns? This follows a Browns executive. I'm going to pull up the Wikipedia summary for it. Sonny Weaver Jr. is a general manager of the Cleveland Browns. One of pro football's most important days, the NFL draft, is drawing near, but Sonny has much more in his mind than which players to recruit. His lover, Jennifer Garner, is pregnant, and the team's owner, Frank Langella, wants to fire him. After Sonny accepts a deal with Seattle that nets him the team's first-round pick, he immediately wonders if he made the right choice for himself and the Browns. This came out in 2014, so my mistake. I remember being so excited about this movie for literally no reason. Like, this movie was not good. I'm sorry. It's so bad it's good. It's one of those movies. If you're a real football fan, it's not plausible whatsoever. Also, the trope about, like, the only woman in football being in love with the general manager bothers me. And then he's, like, taking over for his dad who just died. Nonetheless, great football movie. I remember the press around this was so fire. If anyone listens to the Around the NFL podcast, they did so much press for this. This was really everywhere. I remember Kevin Costner was on like all these ESPN shows, and 14-year-old me was like, why the heck is Kevin Costner here? Was Kevin Costner the one in 24? No, that was Keith Sutherland. But just truly an iconic bad movie that's so bad it's good. And it's just, we're going to kick off this list strong. We're really going to say, no, we're going to get into the good football movies here. At number 9, we have another good one that I think it's fantastic. I'm going to force my kids to watch this movie. I'm going to sit them down and say, you know what, kids, today we were sitting down and we were watching The Game Plan at number 9. Let's read the summary for this one, people. Excuse me, I have to Google all these. Bachelor football star Joe Kingman, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, seems to have it all. He is wealthy and carefree, and his team's on the way to capturing a championship. Suddenly, he's tackled by his unexpected news. He has a young daughter, played by Madison Pettis, the result of a late fling with his ex-wife. Joe must learn to balance his personal and professional life with the needs of his child. This came out in 2007. I'm pretty sure I was going into 3rd grade when this came out. I literally remember we had just moved in Connecticut, and I made my dad take a day off of golf so we could go see The Game Plan. It was really cute. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. It's not higher on this list because it's not an iconic movie or TV show. It's not something that you look back on and say, damn, that was a good TV show or movie. But it's just really iconic. I still quote it to this day. There's this one line, cinnamon, cinnamon, I'm allergic to cinnamon. Anyone knows that line. I quote that with my boyfriend literally all the time. But great TV show, really iconic. Not TV show, movie. It's not so much about football as it is about the father-daughter relationship and the bond that comes from that. And I truly enjoyed that. I remember I cried at one point. There was a cute dog involved. Really all great aspects of the movie. At number 8, here's my outlier, people. We have Silver Linings Playbook. If anyone knows this movie, it is more about mental health and love than it is about football, but it's such a great movie, and it has the Eagles storyline in it that I want to include. And also, if you know me in real life, then you know about my love for Bradley Cooper and how I would literally die for that man. I'm in love with him. Bradley, please, if you're listening, hit me up. We can talk. I love Bradley so much, and yeah, it's not really a football movie, but I want to include it. At number 7, we have Friday Night Lights, the movie. This show is absolutely amazing, which we'll get into, spoiler alert. But this is based off the popular book, which is a must-read. I read the book before I watched the show or the movie, and it's so good. It really highlights what football in Texas is like. And for someone like me who grew up in San Diego, California, where football's big, you have like our local high schools and everything, but I went to a private high school with no football. It really outlined like how big football is there and just how the whole town is built around it. Really great movie. Number 6, we have All American, our first TV show on this list. It's pretty new. If you haven't heard about All American, it's on Netflix. I recommend it. If anyone knows what like Riverdale is or Gossip Girl, it's a little like that. It's set in Beverly Hills, and it's the story of this player from quote unquote the wrong side of town that comes to this prestigious high school to play football. It's a pretty good show. I would say I appreciate how it deals with real issues about race and diversity and sexism and sexual assault. It's very important. Pretty good cast, I have to say. I hadn't really heard of any of the people in the cast, but it was definitely a Netflix binge for me during quarantine. I only watched season 1 so far because there's so many other shows I need to watch, but I recommend it if you're looking for just a good football show. The football is not that great in the show, I have to say. You deal with like an arrogant wide receiver. It really covers all the tropes of high school football that you would think a show like that that's produced by the CW would cover, if that makes sense to you all. At number 5, we have the Paterno movie. So this is by HBO in 2018. It stars Al Pacino, I want to say. Let me look this up. Al Pacino, guys, I was correct on that. So it basically covers Penn State coach Joe Paterno was thrust into the middle of a sexual abuse scandal that dominated the headlines for all of 2018. So if you are not familiar with the Joe Paterno and Jerry Sandusky case that escalated Penn State into the headlines, I really don't want to get too much detail into it because it's a very sad movie. It makes me just like icky to my stomach thinking about all of this, and he was dying of cancer at the time it was going on. And it just makes me icky. It's a disgusting, disgusting case to think about. I hope Jerry Sandusky rots in jail for the rest of his life for what he did. I don't think it's a political thing to say at all. That's a disgusting human being who does things like that. It made me think a lot about the Jerry Sandusky case and how just naive we all are. And then a few years later was the Larry Nassar case in gymnastics. And it really just reminded me how much goes on behind the scenes that we truly don't know about. And I really recommend it. It's on HBO Max if you care to watch it. But it's a good movie. It's definitely sad. It's also, I'm not saying it's going to be like the best movie you've ever seen. I just think if you are interested in the history of that, and Al Pacino does a good job in it, but yeah. Number 4, excuse me, people. Oh my gosh, we got too sidetracked there. So at number 4, people, we have an iconic movie that many will say deserves to be higher up on the list, and I would agree. But guys, when you hear my number 2 and number 1, how passionate I am about them, just, guys, wow. So, Remember the Titans. Number 4, iconic movie. Iconic movie. You have Denzel Washington, who is truly, like, you think of, like, heartfelt, inspiring movies, you think of him. True underdog story. It's just, like, when I think of classic football movies, Remember the Titans has to come to mind. When you're talking to a new-ish football fan, you have to think, like, oh my god, like, Remember the Titans, like, so good. And so, let's read the summary of it for you all. In Virginia, high school football is a way of life, an institution revered. Each game celebrated more lavishly than Christmas, each playoff distinguished more grandly than any national holiday. And with such recognition comes high emotions. In 1971, high school football was everything to the people of Alexandria. But when the local school board was forced to integrate an all-black school with an all-white school, the very foundation of football's greatest tradition was put to the test. This movie also deals with the race issue, and this movie is not, like, a jet setter for, like, racial issues in our country, but it really highlights a true story about what it was like to integrate schools in the 70s. And so I think if you're looking for just a good movie that ushers in diversity and reminds you that there was a time when football was an all-white sport and we were looking at it as black schools and white schools, it reminds you a lot about the history of our country that we don't often want to think of, in my opinion. I often hate remembering the fact that we did that, and I'm disappointed. But Remember the Titans, it would be higher if it were not for my number 1. And number 3, we have Any Given Sunday. Guys, don't watch this movie with your grandpa. Oh my gosh, I was mortified. Little naive me, I think I was 19 years old too. This was 2 years ago. I texted my grandpa one day, or I called him because he doesn't know how to text, guys. I was like, hey, Granddad, like, there's this movie, Any Given Sunday, I heard about. Like, we have to watch it together. It's a football movie. Oh my gosh, you'll love it. Guys, no, oh my gosh. I'm looking up the summary for this movie, but oh my gosh, I was mortified. I'm literally getting, like, a hot flash and, like, not a stroke, but I'm just, like, sweating thinking about, like, this movie and watching it with my grandpa. And so the first, like, 3 minutes, I'm pretty sure there's, like, a nudity scene in it. Like, it was not age appropriate. It's rated R for a reason, I'm pretty sure. But let's go over the summary. So 4 years ago, Dementino, who's played by Al Pacino, Miami Sharks were at the top. Now his team is struggling with 3 consecutive losses, slatting attendance, and aging heroes, particularly in 39-year-old quarterback Jack Rooney, played by Dennis Quaid. Off the field, Dementino is struggling with a failed marriage and estranged children, and is on the collision course with Cristino Panagini, the young president / co-owner of the Sharks organization. So it's directed by Oliver Stone. Really great cast. The cast includes Al Pacino, Cameron Diaz, Jamie Foxx, and Dennis Quaid as, like, the main 4. And it basically covers Jamie Foxx, who plays Willie Beeman. He's kind of the young shot who takes over for Dennis Quaid after he gets injured. And it's a really funny movie. It's very long. I want to say it was 3 hours long. Let me look. It also includes the iconic speech by Al Pacino. Let's look at how long this movie is. 157 minutes. That's 2.5 hours? Yeah. It's a very long movie, and if you're like me and you really have a short attention span / like, you can't focus on things very well, Any Given Sunday I had definitely had to watch in, like, 2 to 3 sittings. I had to have a lot of coffee beforehand as well. But great movie. Do not watch it with your grandpa. Maybe watch with, like, not your parents or someone you don't want to watch inappropriate scenes with, but really iconic football movie. Number 2, we have The Blind Side. The Blind Side, if you don't know about this movie, I mean, I feel like people often use this movie to talk about, like, I don't know, iconic racial barriers being broken, but I'm just going to give the Summary. So Michael Orr is a homeless black man. Oh, this is also based off a true story, I want to say, and a book. Has drifted in and out of the school system for years. Leanne Towie, played by Sandra Bullock, and her husband, Sean, who was played by country singer Tim McGraw, take him in. They become Michael's legal guardians, transforming their lives and others. Both his life and theirs. Michael's tremendous size and protective instincts make him a formidable force on the gridiron, and with help from his new family and devoted tutor, he realizes his potential as a student and football player. So this is just a really heartwarming movie. I could literally, like, cry thinking of this movie and, like, the impact it had on, like, I'm pretty sure it came out in 2009, so 10-year-old me, like, sobbing in the movie theater on Thanksgiving uncontrollably. It's a really great movie. I definitely think over the years it's gotten some flack, and there's people who think it's problematic, but Michael Orr went to the NFL, and it's so heartwarming, you guys. And Sandra Bullock won a Best Actress Oscar for it. It's just such a good movie. I'm literally tearing up thinking about it. But with all that being said, let us review the list before we get into my number one pick. So at number 10, we have Draft Day with Kevin Costner, truly an iconic bad movie. It's so bad, it's good. I recommend it. Don't watch it thinking you're going to get, like, great insight on the NFL draft, because there's definitely some flaws there. Number 9, we have The Game Plan, which is just a great kids movie. I think I'm going to watch it this weekend, actually. There's still parts of it I quote to this day. And then number 8, you have Silver Linings Playbook, which is not necessarily about football per se, but it's such a great movie, and it has the Eagles storyline in it that I had to include it. At number 7, we have Friday Night Lights, which is the movie based off the book. Number 6, we have the show All-American, which is pretty new, about high school. It's always funny in these high school shows because these kids literally are like 30 years old playing 16-year-olds. And I just want to say, I didn't look like that when I was 16, so they need to get realistic casting. Number 5, we have Paterno, which is based off Joe Paterno and the Jerry Sandusky case. It is a bio doc. It's very sad to watch. It's definitely not an easy watch per se, but if you have the time and you want to learn more about it, I would definitely watch that. Number 4, we have Remember the Titans, which is just an iconic football movie of all time. So good. Denzel Washington, race barriers, everything. Number 3, Any Given Sunday. You need to watch this if you want a good laugh, but don't watch with your grandpa. Number 2, we have The Blind Side. Heartfelt, heartwarming, you name it, it has it. Makes me feel warm and fluffy on the inside. And number 1, guys, Friday Night Lights, the TV show. Oh, Friday Night Lights, guys, this show, I could literally do a whole podcast on this show. I am obsessed. I could cry thinking about this show right now. The way this show holds a place in my heart that, like, it shouldn't. Like, TV shows hold a place in my little heart that, like things shouldn't. Like, I should have that much empathy for, like, my parents or, like, my boyfriend or something. You know, I could cry thinking about this show. There is one episode of specific. It is often seen as the best episode, and it is, I'm pretty sure it's called The Father, and it's in season 4, and it's when Matt Saracen finds out his father dies. Oh my god, the acting there. I'm gonna tear up, but Matt Saracen and Tim Riggins and Coach, this show ushered in my love for Kyle Chandler. If you don't know me in real life, I have a nerdy obsession with Kyle Chandler. I will watch any movie he's in without a fail. I've often said this, that I watched Manchester by the Sea on a plane because I thought it'd be, like, a really, like, heartfelt movie. But, oh my gosh, that movie, like, makes me cry without a doubt. So good. Manchester by the Sea. I only watched it because of Kyle Chandler, though. I didn't realize how sad it was going to be. It's really good, but I only watched it for Kyle Chandler. He was in it for maybe 10 minutes, and it made the movie for me. I'm obsessed with him. I will watch anything he is in. If I don't watch Grey's Anatomy, he's, like, the bomb doctor in Grey's Anatomy. So good. And yeah, just freaking obsessed with this show. Tim Riggins, I mean, Texas Forever, Clear Eyes, Full Hearts, Can't Lose. I still say that, guys. I have Instagram captions that say Clear Eyes, Full Heart, Can't Lose. I wanted to get that tattooed on my body. This show, the way it impacted my life, can you tell how passionate I am about it? Like, I could go on and on about this. Lila Garrity, oh gosh, the best football show you will ever watch. It truly makes me feel something so special and so heartwarming inside. I just feel warm and fuzzy. And just watching it, Clear Eyes, Full Hearts, Can't Lose. And the first episode of the show truly tears you apart on the inside. I can't spoil it, but oh my gosh. And Buddy Garrity, and the way oh gosh, the second season I will say is not that good. The second season's a throwaway. I hardly ever watch the second season when I rewatch because it makes no sense. But then as they get older and they usher in new characters, and it's so good. I'm obsessed. I love Matt Saracen so much. I believe he was the most underrated character on the show with his grandma and the way he helped his grandma. I'm gonna cry. I'm literally gonna cry. There's a really good podcast out there. It's called EW Binge, and they rewatch all the seasons of Friday Night Lights, and each episode is like recapping a season of it, and they talk to cast members. They talked to like Matt Saracen's grandma on the show. They talked to the guy who played Tim Riggins. They talked to Kyle Chandler and Connie Britton. Really great podcast I recommend if you like Friday Night Lights as much as I do, because as you can tell by that excitement I just had in my voice, I really love Friday Night Lights, you guys. And with all that today, that wraps up our podcast. I hope you guys all were in a little better mood by the end of it. I personally am. Now I'm going to rewatch Friday Night Lights. I'm going to go upstairs to my parents and be like, Mom, Dad, like, we're not doing family dinner tonight. I'm going to watch Friday Night Lights by myself in my room. But, like, I'm kind of serious at the same time. Like, I fully plan on, like, going and getting a burrito and just, like, sitting in my bed all night. Anyways, thank you guys for listening today. I really appreciate your support. As always, I feel like I'm getting the hang of this a little more. And it's always a little nerve-wracking. I want to remind you all to stay safe and stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive. These are such uncertain times we're living in, and it truly just remember that your health is the most important. And like I said, it's not necessarily for the health of other people. It is for the health. No, it's not necessarily for the health of yourself. It is for the health of other people. And it just, oh gosh. It's just, these are really like weird times we live in, and I just want you all to be safe and healthy. Wear a mask, buy a cute mask from your favorite clothing store or drugstore, whatever. Stay safe, make some comfort food. I saw this really good Instagram post I want to talk about really quickly, and it kind of talked about normalizing things that happen during this pandemic and normalizing gaining weight, not being motivated. I know there have been so many days where I literally don't want to do anything and I have so much to do and I just want to lay in bed and watch TikTok all day. And that's not okay. But I think we need to normalize not being these productive hustlers during the pandemic and always doing everything. And just remember that times are tough right now. Times are definitely difficult. And to stay safe and stay healthy, be with your family, be with your loved ones. Hug everyone you care about. In the past few weeks, I've definitely seen a lot of things going on, but just really sad news. I've mentioned that I know people that have personally passed away from the virus, and so hug your family, hug your loved ones. I don't mean for that to be depressing. This weekend, if you need good TV to watch Friday Night Lights, watch The OC. The OC, I'm pretty sure, is on HBO Max. No, it is on HBO Max because I'm rewatching it on there. Friday Night Lights is on NBC's new streaming service, Peacock. All these movies I just mentioned are available on streaming services or to purchase for rent on Amazon Prime. I really recommend checking them out. If you miss football as much as I do, let us know what you think on social media about this episode. If there's anything you want me to talk about next time, please let me know. I'm always open to suggestions. And again, stay safe, healthy. To any students that are going back to school right now, I'm praying for y'all. I'm praying that you stay safe. And how many times can I say safe? Do it safely and legally. And yeah, just weird times we live in right now. Right, guys? So with all that being said, thank you for tuning into the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to remind you all to leave us a rating and review on iTunes if possible, because it really helps us out. Also, don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to follow us on our social media like Twitter and Instagram. Connect with us. Tell us what you want to hear. And with all that being said, have a great night and a happy Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.